Hello, all of you wonderful people. It's Kate, and I'm back with another mixed media video. And this time we're going to do some mark making. So I grabbed some tools like my fine liners, my bamboo dip pen, and my glass dip pen that I got on a recent Temu haul, and some old black ink that I got in a calligraphy set from Hobby Lobby. So I've got kind of a hodgepodge of things going on here today. And as a side note, I am sorry about the delayed uploads lately. I have been kind of busy for the holidays, and so it's been hard to get to the computer and get these videos edited in time. But I hope you enjoy this video that is coming up today. And so I will just kind of jump right in. I started off with my newer sketchbook that I got from Hobby Lobby. I got 3 different ones. And so I grabbed the bamboo pen and just played around with some warm-up marks. One thing that I notice about when I'm kind of doing intuitive art, drawing, and things like that is I tend to make the same types of marks all the time. And I suppose that you develop kind of a muscle memory there where you tend to go back to the same preferred marks all the time. But one kind of neat thing you can do is really practice going outside of your comfort zone. I know I say that a lot, but really it's true, is just try to do things that you don't normally do, and you can add some different tricks to your lineup for when you're doing just even basic mark making, or if you're incorporating it into a larger project or something more detailed or a piece of art. And it just really gets you into the zone. It gets you warmed up, gets you ready to go with what you're going to be putting down on your paper, canvas, watercolor, journal, whatever it is you're working on. So I started with that for the warm-ups, and I really loved the glass dip pen, and you can see how it had such a finer line than the bamboo one. So kind of experimenting and playing along or playing around with different dip pens can be helpful too, just depending on the type of mark and the thickness you want to make, or whether you want those lines to be variable like you might get with some kind of a brush tip. So for my second project, I could not find my compass. So I grabbed my little circle stencil and I started just drawing some circles and kind of eyeballing them to make a mandala. And this is just another sort of practice with the mark making. So I took a few of the marks I had made on the first page and incorporated those along with some of my other favorites into this little page that I started working on. And this is really cut down for length just to make this video around 10 to 12 minutes, but this took a really, really long time to do actually. But I will say it was a lot of fun to do too. It's so relaxing when you're just kind of sitting there and just sort of, I don't know, coloring in these little shapes and making little patterns and kind of deciding, what little piece will fit there, what little mark will fit here. And it ends up, all these simple little marks, just squiggles and straight lines and dots and blobs. They just really come together to make a really intricate pattern, and you can make some really beautiful designs that way. Now, because this was very freehand, even the circles themselves, it's not completely symmetrical, but it looks pretty good to me, and it was a great exercise. And actually, I wanted to go larger in the circles, and so I made it my mission to get up and find my compass. And then I was able to finish putting down those marks. So I actually broke out a couple of different tip sizes for this one. I used some of my finer tipped fine liners, the 0.2, and I think a couple other sizes. And I also got out the chisel tip, which makes really nice thick lines on the paper. So kind of varying your tools really helps too if you're looking to get some variety in your finished product or your finished drawing or artwork or whatever you're working on. But I really liked doing this, and I don't really do a lot of these types of doodles, although I have some things sort of like this in my earlier videos, and maybe I should start bringing those back a little bit. I kind of got away from them. I get into something for a while and then I find, the next thing. But I should really revisit some of the old stuff I have fun with. And so for my last project, I ended up doing the same thing again, but this time with watercolor. And so I will be working wet on dry. And I broke out the Marie's Masters palette to play with those colors in there. And I just am getting a variety of blues and greens and maybe a little bit of purple for this one. And again, I'm just really exploring with the mark making, with making organic shapes and, letting things partially dry before going back over them, going back over some wet areas, and just letting either some blending or some glazing happen where the parts are a little bit drier and they just kind of layer rather than blend. And you can get kind of a neat little mixture of those effects depending on what what part you're working on the paper and how long it's been kind of sitting there on the page, and also how dry or wet your paintbrush is to begin with. So I mean, all of the effects is really practicing your water control, your moisture control on the page, and your wait time between layers and how long it dries. It makes a difference between blending or getting texture effects, like if you're dropping water on your page or alcohol, or even just going back in with color where it kind of makes that cauliflower bloom when it dries because it's partially dry, and then all the way to a glazing effect where it's layered because you're just doing wet on a completely dry background. So just by playing with that timing and with the water, concentration and all of that, you can really get some interesting effects. And doing little projects like this really helps with that. Just kind of getting to know what the paper looks like during the drying process, and kind of knowing how your colors are going to interact with the layer below if you're going back over a certain spot where it might not be completely dry. And you can see a lot of that going on here. And as I move around the page, you can see just the different stages of drying and how they blend. So if you look at those three round marks on top, I swiped that green color over them when it was still pretty moist, and you can see that blue kind of spread into the shape below. Now, if you look at sort of that bluish rectangle shape in the middle, you can see where that was partially in the drying process, but it was still not completely dry. And so that had a much more rough transition where it did not blend nicely, but it blended with an interesting texture. And when I say nicely, I guess I mean evenly, because you might want that kind of texture when you're doing it. And it really has its place in, different applications if that's what you're going for. And then you have the plain old glazing where a good example of that is those sort of purplish lines to the left, and they just make a very clean overlay to that blue below. So I worked with kind of a limited palette with this one, and it really, I don't know, I really did enjoy it. And, varying how the colors were watered down or whether they were full strength. And, this was just really another meditative process, just like the first two. And they're really useful when you're trying to practice, when you're trying to figure out your blending techniques and, what you need to do with your brush. And if you use the same brush, it can be even more helpful, helping you learn how to use a new brush, or all the different things that your specific brush can do, because those are all going to be a little bit different too, depending on what your bristles are like and made of, what the brand is, and all of those types of things. So this project as a whole was just very zen, very fun and just, I don't know. I really, really love sitting down with a piece of paper and just playing. I mean, this whole thing is supposed to be about bringing joy to your life and, kind of discovering the important things to you in the creative process and building your own creative process. And, you know, it doesn't really matter what the final result of this painting is. What matters is what I'm learning about my process and figuring out what really, screams out to me as, yes, use me again next time. And, oh, I didn't really like that so much. So, um, you just really can discover a lot. And you might even discover techniques that you hadn't tried before and you just kind of stumble on by accident. And, an example of that for me was the last time I made my collage paper videos, I accidentally did a magazine page transfer. Never did it before in my life. Didn't know how. I knew it was possible, but I didn't really know. And it just sort of happened. So you just never know. And with the gouache and everything else on top, which is a great way to add white, by the way, to the top of watercolor, I really like how these little exercises turned out. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more like this. Have a wonderful holiday, because Christmas is right around the corner if you celebrate that, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, keep creating.